Okay, so the next question is, how's the amount of child support determined in Illinois? I started to kind of hint at that answer, or at least part of the answer, in the answer to who's responsible, when I was talking about, well, it depends on how many nights or who has the child, if it's 50-50 or something along those lines. So if it is a true 50 and 50, then the court may not order any child support. It's within their discretion to deviate from the state guidelines. So if it is 50-50, you might not pay any child support. You might not receive any child support. Or it certainly, if there is any awarded, it's going to be a lot less than if it wasn't 50-50. So the amount of time in parenting time affects the child support obligation. Naturally, so does how much money you make, and so that's going to be a consideration for the child support. So let's back it all the way up to the original question, because I started to get ahead of myself in answering the first question. So let's just tackle this one right now as it's written, which is, how's the amount of child support determined in Illinois? Well, turns out it's a little more complicated than we would like, or at least as it makes it to understand. And that's because the legislators decided to adopt an income shares model for child support, which is progressive and similar to what many states are doing right now. But the Illinois, true to its nature, put a little bit of flair on how we calculate that. So the rough sketch of it is this: the legislators came up with this nifty little table that they think shows how much it costs to raise a child. And that table is structured as follows. So if it looks at, if it takes both parents' incomes, puts it together, so that's going to be in one spot. And then it says, how many children are there? And then so based off of that doubled income with this many children, it's going to cost this much to care for those kids per month. And then it takes that number and it looks at the proportion of those two incomes and takes that, smacks it onto the obligation, and that becomes what each parent owes. So, if one parent was contributing 70% of their of the income, then they'd be responsible for 70% of that nifty little number the legislators determine is what it costs to rear a child. So that's how the amount would be determined. Really, you don't need to worry about that. You basically just go to the website and type in the information for calculating child support. So I'll show you how I do that right now. You just pop on over to Google or Bing or whatever you use, and you just type in Illinois Child Support Estimator. Click on the first one. Don't click on all these other ones. They're just trying to trick you and to go into advertisements. The first one is illinois.gov. It is hidden though, so once you get here, I can see why you might choose those other sites, because it makes it look a little easier to pick. But you just want to click this one for child support professionals and attorneys. It's right down here. I don't know why the state decided to bury all of their URLs, but that's what happens. And then here's the calculator. This is what I was saying. You just put the numbers in, and it'll spit you out what the support obligation is. So you don't have to go to that table, do all the math, and look at it. In fact, before this calculator came out, I did make my own Excel spreadsheet that went through those lines and then calculated it on its own. But now we use this, and there's even family law software. It's a proprietary piece of software that calculates the support obligation as well. So, I mean, there's other ways to do this, but here's the cheapest and, it's free and the most accurate. So I always say, we're not trying to get the exact figure. We're trying to get within 10%, 5% of the ballpark of what the support obligation is going to be. So typically, though, the numbers aren't going to differ. If you put the numbers in, it's going to spit a number out. You can't argue with that number outside of it. I mean, you can. The judge might take into consideration some higher extracurricular costs or health insurance that are being paid for that the support calculator doesn't, but it's rare that happens. So, I mean, you can try, but most of the time, the numbers in, spit out the number out, and that number is what your support obligation is going to be. Depending on the software used, it might be just a few dollars, depending on the amount. But it's not really worth bickering over $10 or even $100 really to pay another attorney to spend another 30 minutes fighting over $100. is not really worth it. So I don't encourage that. I say get to the ballpark. That's all you need to do. But I'll kind of run through this and show you some of the things that are used in determining the amount for child support, since that was the core of the question. So first up is just the number of children and the number of overnights with the custodial parent. So let's say there's 2 children and they're with mom, the custodial parent, 300 nights. We'll stick with the standard income model being used. Unless you're earning $500,000 or more, the individualized isn't really worth it. All right, so this is gross. It's not your net, and it's not your take-home pay. It's the gross before taxes, before anything's taken out. So let's just say mom makes $3,000 per month, dad makes $5,000 per month, and then it goes and looks at, well, is mom getting any maintenance or even child support from other relationships, not of this one, for other children? Are they getting Social Security, anything? All sources of revenue will be calculated. Likewise, it also considers, well, are there other children of other relationships that need to be accounted for, and not just with a support order. So it allows, previously the statute was a first in time got the most money, sort of whoever applied for child support first got the most money. So you could have a 1-year-old getting more child support than a 7-year-old if that 1-year-old's parent filed before the 7-year-old's parent. But no, that's not the case. And so you would apply for a multifamily adjustment and type that in. It'll spit out a number, presumably by taking into account the cost for bearing the other children. And then you have to put in the health insurance if it's provided or not. And then it also includes all kids. So if the state is providing child support, then you could put that here. But let's just say it's provided by the non-custodial parent, and the family amount is $250. So depending on who you're representing, you're going to be fighting over this health insurance amount. I said you can't fight about what the support obligation is after you put the numbers in, but you sure can fight about what numbers get put in here. So the amount of child support, it often is, you're going to have you're supposed to take the difference between the single coverage and the family plan coverage. So let's say it's the single coverage is $150 and the family plan is $400, then the difference would be $250. So that's what it costs to provide health insurance for the 2 children. It's not the $400, because he or she would be paying that $150 for he or himself no matter what. But then to add the kids on is that extra $250. So I hope 400 minus 150 is 250, right? I hope so. We're just gonna roll with that in case I'm wrong. So that's what you'd put there. Now, if I was representing the obligor here, I would certainly say no, $400. Let's put that on there. Let's see if the other attorney notices that it's $400 instead of $250, and see what they say. But also you can stick in some child care expenses, extraordinary expenses, and so on. Child care is kind of the big one. And so sometimes this turns into also a skirmish, because they're like, well, mom's not working and she should work. Like, okay, yeah, all right, let's say she works and then she gets $2,000 per month, but she's paying $1,000 in child care. So suddenly we'll put that on there, and your obligation is probably going to be more than if you just didn't complain about her not working and left it at that. So we'll run some of those scenarios here for a second, because I know I just did a bad job explaining that. So let's just run this, and then we'll do some of the what if scenarios afterwards. And this is what I do with clients. I'll get on a virtual meeting, share the screen, run through those what ifs, and we'll see where we end up. So let's just calculate this and see what it spits out. So what do we have? Dun, da, 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 da. So that's the support obligation here. It's going to be $876. That's what he is supposed to be paying mom based off of this scenario. So then let's say, okay, well, maybe mom could earn more than $3,000. Let's say she could earn $5,000. What happens then? Calculate it. Come down here. Drops it $100. that's pretty wild that it was she earns 2,000 more, but it drops your support obligation down to 100. People panic. They're like, how is that possible? It doesn't make any sense. It should have gone down a whole lot. Well, most likely what happened, it was, remember that table I mentioned before, when you look at both parties' incomes, you smack them together, and that with 2 kids, it's going to cost this much to raise the children. So it probably bumped them up into a new tier where the legislators think that it's going to cost a lot more to raise 2 children if you have a combined income of $10,000 per month than $8,000 per month. And therefore your obligation doesn't drop as much as you thought it would. Like I said, you can't argue with this number. That's just the number that comes out. You can argue with the numbers that go in, but not the number that comes out. All right, so what were we saying? Okay, so let's just say she's earning nothing. She's not working, and you are. So what do we got here? And then, boom, look at that, $1,233. That's a significant amount of an increase from before. So you were like, okay, no, I don't want her to be not working. She needs to be working at least a little bit. So let's say she's working and making $2,500, but child care is $800 a month. So her net has certainly increased because now she's getting $1,700 a month in revenue, whereas she was getting 0. But what does that do with your support obligation? Let's just see. Does drop it to $300. Drops at $300, but now this is the kicker. Why people think this doesn't make any sense when I say, oh, your obligation could be more than if she wasn't working, because now she has a right to ask, unless you can provide free child care. She has a right, and a judge most likely will award half of that child care expenses. So now you're paying $400 in child care expenses plus $930. So you're paying $1,330 per month. So let's go back to the last calculations where it was 0 and 0. So let's remember the number I said, $1,330. All right, let's see. Maybe I'm wrong. I got this completely off. I don't know. $1,330, $1,230. So you're going to be paying $100 more for her to work. You got to really fight that child care expense. Maybe you'll win and not have to pay it, but if you do get hit with it, that's an issue. So you really have to. That's why I have these what if scenario conversations with my clients, because if you lose, you're gonna be paying more. Is that what you want? I don't know. And don't get mad at me. Get mad at your legislators. If you don't like how this is written, you need to talk to them, because you can't argue with the number that comes out. You argue with the numbers that go in. So that's just kind of one example of how the child support is determined in Illinois.